NFL Stock Exchange podcast. I am Trevor Sikkema. With me is Connor Rogers on a free agency mock draft Monday edition of the show. Connor, this is one of our most exciting mock draft Mondays that we do for the entire calendar, man. It just happened to be that I was releasing one of my own mock drafts, so you get to take this time to roast me on some of my picks. Basically, throw any question you want at me as we run down this mock draft with free agency just hours away.
Yeah, dude, you always got a trick up your sleeve, and that is something I appreciate about you. This is impeccable timing. We are going to have some fun today, and if you are just tapping into the show right now, and it might be 4 hours past the free agency opening bell, it might be 24 hours, don't go anywhere, because a lot of today is going to be, yes, Trevor's original picks in this mock draft, but also me throwing scenarios at him of what if this team does this in free agency, the trade market, or anything like that. Is there alternate directions they can go? So I would call this the most fluid mock draft we've done on the show today, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
I think that that's a good way to put it. And, you know, actually, for those who have gone to PFF to read the mock draft, at the beginning, the little paragraph at the beginning before you get to the mock, which I know no one reads anyways, if you happen to read it, you would know that this mock draft that I wrote, we're trying something a little different, and it's going to be a live free agency mock draft. So when guys sign to certain teams, when big moves happen, when team needs change, I'm going to go in and I'm literally going to change my mock draft as free agency week evolves. So we're doing the podcast here on a Monday because we wanted to establish the run, if you will, establish the mock draft Monday for this podcast. But this is going to be an ever-changing thing. Like Connor said, he's going to bring plenty to the table of questions that teams could be doing in free agency, all that kinds of stuff. And so, look, I'll just leave it to you. I'll leave it right to you. Where do you want to start with this mock draft? We'll talk about all the picks and I'll mention all the picks, but where do you want to start with this one?
Right at number one. We're not going anywhere.
I
think we're going to start right at number one with Jacksonville. You had them taking Aidan Hutchinson number one overall, which me sitting here having Aidan Hutchinson number one overall futures from November, I would be ecstatic by that. But I think there's no doubt that for the last 2 months or so, we've felt Jacksonville is going to look to improve that offensive line. Then the franchise tag comes along, and everybody's kind of spinning around going, okay, maybe they like what they have at left tackle. Maybe they think Aidan Hutchinson's the best overall player. Trevor, this is the first time in a long time I think the number one pick is so unpredictable. And my question for you is, because I have no problem taking Aidan Hutchinson number one overall. He's going to be a really good player.
Right.
Him and Josh Allen's a fun edge duo. You got to be able to rush the quarterback, especially in the AFC, if you want to go anywhere. There's too many good passers, and that's where it all starts. My question for you, we know Jacksonville is a very tuned-in ownership group to what's going on outside. Will they be afraid of the PR, overall outlook around picking a defensive player when they've screwed up the first 300 plus days of Trevor Lawrence's career there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question, right? And you and I have talked about this on this podcast, that it could be a handful of players here going number one overall. And I have Aidan Hutchinson because that's what my gut's telling me right now. This is a predictive mock draft. This isn't necessarily what I would do. We're at that point of the year where we're trying to give you guys a look into our crystal ball, if you will. We are trying to predict what's going to happen. That's what mocks in March and April really are for, unless they're specified otherwise. And so this is a predictive mock for me. And as of right now, the Cam Robinson franchise tag makes me think that this truly is wide open. Before the franchise tag with Cam Robinson, you and I both, I think, have been leaning offensive tackle for the Jags. And so, it made sense if they were going to move on from Cam Robinson, even if they liked what they've seen from Walker Little, which I know is the case. They've got Walker Little. They have Juwan Taylor. You add another offensive lineman. It's not like that's a bad investment in any way, shape, or form, especially when it's a guy who could be an Ike Ekwonu, an Evan Neal, Charles Cross, something like that. But I think Hutchinson is edging them out right now. I really do. And people are kind of, I guess, a little disappointed by his combine, which is kind of silly because I thought that he tested the way that he was going to. Maybe he didn't show up as long with the length as people thought, but the 3-cone was absolutely out of this world, like everybody thought it was going to be. And to get back to your question, I don't really think they should think about that as much as I know that like Jags fans are very into their team, and they're very vocal on social media. And it's one of my favorite fan bases. I love Jags fans. I really do. The team should just be picking the player that they believe is best. And right now, I feel like Aidan Hutchinson has that edge. Now, that might not be the case at all times, but that's what I think at the time.
And I think I totally agree with that. I think it's more of a, it's a problem with them. I think the fact that they buy into whether it's hype or PR hits or anything like that, maybe it's time to do things differently. But at the same time, the fans of the Jaguars, they are a passionate, loud fan base, and they've been right a lot, and things have gone wrong that they feared. So I would get that as well. And I think they are a team that should spend a lot of money in free agency. So maybe this conversation is easier a couple of days into free agency, where it's like, okay, they franchise tagged Cam, they added an interior offensive lineman, and they signed a receiver, right? And they signed a mid-tier tight end. And then you look at it and go, the offense isn't where it needs to be, but it's taken significant steps from the money they've spent that it leaves the number one pick a little bit more wide open to take who they think is the best player. And in this case, it's Aidan Hutchinson. Then you can look at 33 and go, we'll get a wide receiver then, or we'll get one of the offensive linemen that's in tier 2 or 3 there. All right, let's keep this thing moving. I don't want to spend the whole day on the number one pick, but that was a good start because.
Well, hold on. Should I run through just the top 10? I feel like I should.
Please.
So I could run through it, and then we could go back.
We're not going very far right now either, so you might as well
which
get that
is
out.
kind of why I wanted it. Okay, so Aidan Hutchinson obviously went number 1 overall to the Jaguars. I have Kyle Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame, going number 2 to Detroit. Evan Neal, the offensive tackle from Alabama, going 3 to the Houston Texans. Ike Ekwonu, the offensive tackle from NC State, going number 4 to the Jets. I got Jermaine Johnson, the pass rusher from Florida State, going number 5 to the New York Giants. Charles Cross to the Carolina Panthers, the offensive tackle from Mississippi State. Trevor Penning, the offensive tackle from Northern Iowa. He's going 7 to the New York Giants. I have a feeling we're going to be talking about that a little bit. Travon Walker to the Atlanta Falcons. Kayvon Thibodeau to the now Seattle Seahawks. Welcome to the first round conversation. Seattle post Russell Wilson trade. And then for the Jets, I got Sauce Gardner at number 10 to kind of round it out there. So from that top 10, let's go back and talk about what you want to talk about.
Yeah, fun top 10 because let's go right to number 2, okay? And I'm not going to do this, guys. I'm not going to do every pick, so don't worry if you're hating my pace right now. What I loved about this was Kyle Hamilton at 2 to the Lions. This scenario, no one is talking about. No one is talking about the what if Aidan Hutchinson goes number 1? And I know people are talking about that. They're not talking about what does that do to the following draft pick with the Lions at 2, because everything you and I have heard from Indy and for a long time is that the Lions are taking Aidan Hutchinson at 2. But if they're not afforded that opportunity, they've invested a lot of resources into the offensive line. And that starts with, that's not a previous regime thing. This new regime has already done that as well with Sewell. So for me, Trevor, and I'm going to toss this to you because I'm fascinated by it, I think, 1, they try like hell to get out of this pick if this happened, which not going to be easy. Just going to be honest with you. You're not going to get the value that you should. Or they go best player available because they are like Jacksonville, the Lions, the Texans, the Jets, no coincidence, the top 4. The Giants at 5. Their roster just needs good players. You're not really going to pick apart certain things. For the most part, you need good players. So in this scenario, and Kyle Hamilton, a little spoiler, is not a top 5 player on my big board. I love the player. He's going to fall right around 7 or 8, but he's a really, really good player. And in this scenario, you just throw your hands up and you're going, they get a really good player at a position they need that can contribute right away. How did you get to this conclusion, basically? And I mean, I agree with you. I think if Hutchinson goes, I don't think they take Thibodeau in the spot. I think it's really down to Hamilton or a trade.
Right. I think that this is the scenario that I kind of wanted to explore, like you said, if Hutchinson is off the board, because I think people for a long time have got very comfortable with mock drafts saying, okay, any offensive tackle at number 1, and then we'll pencil in Hutchinson at number 2, and we can move on. Almost to say like, all right, we're not going to piss people off at the top of the draft, but what if it falls like that? And I really do. You look at Vegas odds, and Hutchinson's rising. It may be the favorite in some books to go number 1 overall. And if that's the case, what do the Lions do? I agree with you. I'm not so convinced that they pick Kayvon Thibodeau, right? I mean, when you look at what Brad Holmes has been saying.
I don't think they do, by the way.
Right.
I think there's like a 5% chance they do.
So, I mean, you listen to what Brad Holmes has said. You listen to what Dan Campbell has said. Like, they're going to pick super tough, like, and they say this super tough, like high character dudes, like players that they believe in, very versatile, all that kinds of stuff. And I'm not saying that Kayvon Thibodeau isn't any of those things. I don't know the answer to that question myself, but I do know that the NFL has questions on those things for Kayvon Thibodeau. And maybe the Lions are one of those teams that do, because man, for as much as we got on here last week and I said that Kayvon Thibodeau should have been a winner at the combine, and I still believe that, that doesn't take away the fact that there are clearly NFL teams who question things about Kayvon that is having him fall down the board. And I'm just not really convinced that he goes number 2 overall. I think there's a better chance that Malik Willis would go number 2 overall than Kayvon Thibodeau at this point, right? Which I don't think is super plausible still. I'm not really there. Like I said, when we talked about this before, we heard whispers about this at the combine. So all that to get back to Kyle Hamilton. He's an extremely versatile, extremely high character, like unanimous praise for how much teams love the dude. He can play basically any safety spot that you want. He's got unique size and athleticism. Okay, so he didn't test like Derwin James. So what? You've seen what the guy plays like when he's got the cleats and the helmet. But right, and that's the thing. Like, you guys it was the same thing with Treylon Burks, right? It's like, he was good. He's a good athlete for his size. We've got to let people be able to succeed with their own athleticism within the realm of realistic expectations. We can't just expect to get blown out of our socks every single year. Sometimes good players are just good players, and you can just check the boxes off. I think that Kyle Hamilton certainly did that at the combine. He did not disappoint in any way, shape, or form. And honestly, man, all of those things combined makes me feel like the Lions, like you mentioned, just need really good football players. They're going to like the really clean, unique scouting profile that Kyle Hamilton brings to the table. So that's why I got him at 2.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think this is a scenario that has to be on the table with Hutchinson going number 1. And I think my take with Hamilton is, because you see crazy things this time of year, I think he's closer to Jeremy Chin on the spectrum than like Derwin James, Sean Taylor. But if he's a better version of Jeremy Chin, that's an excellent player. So I think that, the context is so important, and the fact that they need a legit player in that secondary that can kind of come in and be the face of that secondary while they're also building up the front as well, which they could still do in this draft. They have an extra first round pick. They have pick 34. There are edge rushers in this draft. So, okay. Number 3, I'm not going to stop there, but we'll say that you had Evan Neal at 3. I think with all the news buzz around Tunzel, whether they move him or not, I think the Texans are in on the offensive line market as much as they are the mysterious team of the top 5. Mm-hmm. No problem there. Number 4, the Jets. Stop here quick. Ike Ekwonu. They would run this one in. That's my belief, at least.
Right.
And this is something you and I have talked about for a while. If Ekwonu makes it to 4, which is truly a 50-50 right now, right?
That's you're right. Yeah.
Nobody knows. I mean, we've seen him at 1. We've seen him at 3. So I'm sure the Jets would love it. I think the Jets would love it if Ekwonu made it to 4, and I think they'd run in the card. So this was a no-brainer for you in that scenario. We will stop at the Giants, and we'll kind of just pair the Giants together right here, right? Okay. So for the Giants are your picks. At 5, you had Jermaine Johnson. I love it. At 7, you had Trevor Penning. I hate it. And I know this isn't like you making the picks, like you sitting in Joe Shane's chair and being like, I have come across this scenario so many times in the last month or two while doing mock drafts or mock scenarios. And there are so many times in my brain that, every time in my brain, Neal, Ekwonu are gone, and Cross is gone at 6. Mm. And then the Giants at 7, they took an edge at 5, and you're like, well, everybody knows that they want an offensive lineman. And you hear how much the league loves Trevor Penning.
Right.
And man, he's terrifying as a top 10 pick. He's terrifying. His anchor isn't where it needs to be yet. Yes, he's tough and nasty, but he gets beat in pass pro a decent amount. And I think this is so interesting because I can easily see this pick happening, but I would have a legitimate fear if this was their answer to upgrading the offensive line instantly. While at number 5, Jermaine Johnson, slam dunk for them. Slam dunk. He'd be a star for them. Him up on that defensive line with Leonard Williams and Ojulari. That's a home run. So, Trevor, after all that, I'll ask you this. Do you just take Charles Cross, number 5, because you're so afraid of the Panthers at 6? Who might not be making that pick anyway, but let's stay right here for now.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, look, if if Trevor Penning goes number 7 overall, that's not a pick that I agree with. I think that he is further away than it seems like his stock is rising to be in NFL circles. You mentioned it. We really have not heard a lot of negative talk on Trevor Penning. Now, we haven't obviously talked to teams specifically, so I don't know if for sure the Giants are in that camp. But when I was at Joe Schoen's podium, their general manager, he continued to talk about 3 words with offensive line: smart, tough. Dependable, right? And tough. he continued to mention all of those words. And look, every coach wants that, right? Every GM wants that. That's what you want in your offensive lineman. But he continued to bring those words up time after time after time, which means I really think that he is going to lean on that a lot. What does everybody talk about with Trevor Penning? Unbelievable nastiness in his tape, right? The smart, the tough, the finishing mentality, that's all there. You can believe in Trevor Penning at that point when you watch his tape, and you can fall in love with those adjectives when you are watching what you're watching. Also, Joe Schoen mentioned dependable, okay? For the last 3 seasons of play with Trevor Penning, he has played in and started in 33 out of 33 games, including Connor, going back to 2020's fall season. And then if you remember, the FCS had a spring shortened season, and then he comes back around and immediately plays again in the fall. So this dude didn't even get a full off season, and he played in and started in all 33 games for his team. I think that's going to play a lot into what Joe Schoen sees from this offensive line class, especially with the big 3, if you will, offensive linemen already off the board. I don't know if Trevor Penning is going to end up going this high, but I continue to hear a lot of high praise for him. This is probably another spot where maybe the Giants are going to try to trade down a little bit. Shane's probably going to want to get that buffer zone, get some extra picks, be creative in this draft class. But I think he is firmly on their radar. Whether or not they feel comfortable picking him at 7, I wanted to put him on New York Giants fans' radars because I really do think after listening to Joe Schoen's presser, he is a heavy target for them. And then, of course, Jermaine Johnson. I think this guy's a lock for the top 10. I think a lot of NFL teams value him there. He's been one of the biggest risers throughout this draft class. And so I think that they're really going to focus on the trenches. And then number 5, I mean, I don't even think that's too rich for Jermaine Johnson. I think this is probably where it starts. Like, I don't think he's going number 3 or anything.
Starts at 4.
Okay. All right. There's a little nugget. It starts at 4, but I think this is a realistic spot for Jermaine Johnson.
I think so too. I think you did a really good job here. I like that your mock you're not just fan servicing. Like, you are genuinely presenting scenarios that are very realistic. And I think I presented that wrong, where it almost comes off, I don't think Trevor Penning can be a good player. I think he can be a good player, but he is still in the category of developmental tackle that will have serious road bumps in the first year or 2. And that's the case for a lot of guys, except this class is pretty unique, where there's a trio at the top that are pretty rare. And the Giants, are obviously in this mold of, we need to do right by Daniel Jones, and you just want to make sure you get that right. So I'm fascinated by their 5 and 7 duo there. And another reason I'm so fascinated by it, because that sandwich right in the middle there is the Carolina Panthers at 6. You have taken Charles Cross. I don't know if you and I have done a mock draft, both of us, without making this pick. And I know I've done the evens a lot when we've ping-ponged, and you've had a couple mock drafts already on the show. We always have Charles Cross at 6. Good and dandy. An A pick for me. Love Charles Cross. I think he's tremendous, a gifted pass protector, super athletic run blocker. What does Houston do if they make in this pick? Because we know the Panthers are in on Deshaun Watson. We hear it all the time. As you're listening to this pod today, this trade could be freaking done by now. Right. What does Houston do if they are picking at 6 after they just took an offensive tackle at 3?
I think they're taking either Travon Walker or Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't know what Houston thinks of Kayvon Thibodeau, but I think it's going to be one of those 2 guys. I think Travon Walker is essentially a lock for the top 10 at this point, from the unanimous praise that we have heard of him, from how much he has risen since the end of the season, and obviously during the season as well, with how well he played with Georgia. I think the top 10 to draft Travon Walker's profile as it stands right now in the top 10 would let's just say, not go along the lines of what we've seen in draft classes of the past, because this guy is uniquely gifted when it comes to a size, speed, and power combo. He really is. Being able to run a 4.5, 140-yard dash at 272 pounds, 6'5", 35.5-inch arms. It's never happened before at the combine. And so I think that's why you're going to see a lot of teams get very wide-eyed about Travon Walker, but he doesn't have the pass rush ability right now. He doesn't have the pass rush plan. He doesn't have the pass rush moves. Now, that's not to say that he can't learn that. I was able to sit down with him not too long ago and talk about that exact thing. And he talked about the guys that he's watching and how he's trying to develop his plan. He said, I'm always going to be a speed to power kind of a guy, and I've got to work my moves off of that. I've got to work my counters off of that. So he gets it, but he hasn't put it on film yet. And some of that has to do with the deep talent rotation at Georgia. But all of that to say, I think that he is in play for the top 10. Shoot, man, we've even seen mock drafts where he goes 3 overall. So I wonder if he's even going to be on Houston's board to maybe go as high as number 3. Certainly if they have picks number 3 and number 6, I think Travon Walker could very easily be one of those selections. But it kind of depends, right? Because Lovie Smith's the head coach right now. Lovie Smith traditionally runs that 4-3 kind of Tampa 2 defense. And Travon Walker, where obviously he could be good as a base 5 end or a base 5-tech defensive end, I feel like Travon Walker would have been more for a pick for Houston of old, if you will, that 3-4, those long, strong defensive linemen that you might want like on the interior playing in a lot of different alignments. I don't want to say it's cookie cutter with Lovie Smith, but like it's pretty regimented roles with him. At least that's kind of the way the structure is up front as a base. And I think that if they're going to stick with more of a 4-3, then I think Kayvon Thibodeau makes more sense for you. But are they going to be in on Kayvon Thibodeau? Who knows? Ultimately, I think this is an edge rusher to answer your question at number 6. If Houston is picking where Carolina is, if they send Deshaun Watson out that way.
I think so too. I think it's a combination of capitalizing on where the draft class is strong at the top while also remaking your trenches that are just not where they need to be right now. They're not even close. So I think it's a good balance there. And that's a really good transition. You talked about Travon a lot. Number 8 is the Atlanta Falcons, and that's where you had him going off the board. So yeah. I know you made this pick because reality is Travon Walker is going to be a top 10 pick. As I look at my big board right now, he is my 22nd ranked player. My problem with Travon as a top 10 pick, Trevor, is that can you draft a guy in the top 10 that does not know how to rush the passer yet, right? That's my question, where I know he's loaded up with traits. He's a great tester. He's got size. He's got length. He's got great work ethic. He is an excellent run defender, right? And really, whatever scenario you put him in, if you kick him out to 5-tech, he could set a strong edge. If you kick him into 3, 4-eye, he's just a very strong player and can contain so well. Could even actually get into the backfield and blow up plays and control everything with his length. He has no pass rush plan right now. And there is nothing more that coaches love than looking at a guy that is just built in a lab, tests like he's built in a lab, and they go, that guy's a good player right now. Because Travon Walker is a high floor player because he is such a good run defender loaded up with traits. But in the top 10, you are also trying to draft ceiling. Coaches love to look at that guy and go, he's a good starter right now. I'm going to make him a superstar. For me, in this class that's loaded with pass rush talent, that's not a guy I'm taking in the top 8 because that's a really scary scenario. But we are at the point where it doesn't matter what I think, it's happening.
Right. And I would say that the league would push back on that thinking a little bit, because you said in this class with this many good edge rushers, you wouldn't pick him this high. I think the NFL would push back a little bit on you and say, in this class, overall, I'm going to pick that guy because he's so uniquely gifted.
That's fair.
And, and I mean, you are right. Every coach in the NFL probably says to themselves, I can make this guy into a Pro Bowler. And that's where we are with Travon Walker. So I agree with you, man. I think that when we went through our defensive line, our edge rushing episode, I didn't even have Travon in my top 5. I think I had him right out either 6 or 7. I called him a early second-round pick and a fantastic early second-round pick to get. But the reality is that that's just not happening. We're not going to get anywhere close to this. I think this dude's a lock for the top 10 or top 12 probably at the very latest.
Yeah, I think so too. And we know Atlanta's in the pass rush market, so
yes.
That's definitely a landing spot on the board. Okay, at 9, you had Seattle taking Kayvon Thibodeau.
Mm.
Absolutely. Can easily see that one happening.
Right.
We won't stop there. At 10, we will briefly stop before we move on to 11 through 20. The Jets at 10, you have them taking Sauce Gardner. The value adds up. The need adds up. My question, and I think this is going to be the question for the Jets if they're presented with this scenario, Sauce Gardner at 10, assuming they don't pay like a Carlton Davis or whatever it is, or the wide receiver of their choice.
Wow, you just had to say Carlton Davis, didn't you? Of all the corners, you just had to say Carlton Davis, didn't you?
It's kind of screwed up. I mean, Tom Brady's coming back. You'll be fine. All right.
Of course. Yeah, he's coming back. He's coming back.
I saw the Ronaldo video. He was like, maybe. And honestly, I want to throw this to you. Would you take Sauce is a top 5 player, I think, for me. He's an excellent corner prospect. The Jets need a player like that. They also need to get Zach Wilson help. The wide receiver market in free agency does not have a top dog. And I can make the case because they're all in my top 20. Jameson Williams, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, Drake London. Any of the 4. The Jets were abysmal in contested catch situations last year, which is why you might be in the Burks-London combo. But they don't have the long speed that Jameson has. And then Garrett Wilson's just a really good player. Mm-hmm. You obviously gave them Sauce, but after I say that to you, how would you make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, this was close for me. I'll let you know that I was debating giving Sauce to the Giants at 7. So I was debating him maybe not being on the board even for the Jets to pick this. But I think what ultimately swayed me in the way of Sauce Gardner is a conversation that you and I have had already a couple of times here on this podcast. And that is, there will always be wide receivers to pick. Not even just in this draft. And I'm not even just talking about like later on day 2 for the Jets. I mean, every year you're going to have the chance to pick a really good wide receiver. I think the way that I've put it before is that once out of every 3 years, you will have the chance, some way, shape, or form, whether it's in free agency or in the draft, to pick a home run wide receiver 1. That's just the world we live in.
Yeah,
that is that once every 2 to 3 years, you will have that chance, whether you even want it or not, whether teams take it or not, it will be available to them. And so when I flip that and I say, how often are you going to get a potential CB1 shutdown, lockdown, man coverage corner? It ain't that often. And so I think that's what ultimately sways me in that direction, is that even though I believe that winning the arms race in the NFL, if you will, is very important, getting 3-4 wide receivers that can all play at a really high level is where you need to be in today's NFL to compete on the scoreboard, light it up the way that you need to. On the flip side of things, you being able to go out and get corners that can erase some of those really great wide receivers, I think is really important. And so just for the sheer aspect of looking at how the football world is right now, it is still more difficult to get a player of Sauce Gardner's caliber that could reach his ceiling at corner than it is to pick one of these wide receivers who you and I both really like. All those guys you mentioned, we really like them. You will have the opportunity to get players like that, I feel like, in every class. Now, I say that and watch Treylon Burks go out and be the greatest unique player in the NFL or something like that. I don't mean to take away from it, but I think in the game of the draft and player acquisition, you still got to lean top tier corner, especially in this class with this scenario.
I think it's a great argument. It's the old argument of the fact that only, a couple good corners come around each year at most. And we've been kind of spoiled lately. I think a lot of people don't realize that. We had Horn and Surtain last year, and even for his injuries, Caleb Farley was really talented. And then obviously this year you have someone like Sauce. Even with his injuries, Derek Stingley is really, really talented. Mm-hmm. But we're spoiled in that sense. The last 3 years, we can name 10 wide receivers from each class that you feel great about. So I think that argument holds a lot of weight, especially if you're a New York Jets team that is picking twice more after this in the top 40. Correct. Might be a wide receiver there. So I like that argument. It's a really interesting one. All right, let's move on. You want me to rattle through these? You want to rattle through these picks here, 11 through 20?
I will, but first I got to talk to people about a promo code, because if they don't have a premium subscription at PFF, There's never been a better time, because right now you can get 25% off any subscription at PFF if you use the promo code NFLSE, so you can support the podcast as well. You get all the premium article content, you get the draft guide, you get the fantasy football guide, you get all the in-season betting tools, everything, man. Go check it out. See which subscription model works best for you. And if you don't have it, like I said, use the promo code NFLSE. You will get 25% off. Also, our friends over at All-22, they're creating a brand new game that's using PFF grades to essentially, it's a fantasy football. I try to explain this as best I can. It's like a Madden franchise meets fantasy football. And
pretty gnarly.
All-22 uses weekly PFF grades as one of its main scoring components. So you're not just basing how your team performs every week off of stats. Like, it's true performance. You were trying to build the best team. And the best part is All-22 is consistently working on this game to make it better and better and better every time you use it. Join the waitlist right now, all-22.com. Put your email in. And if you join the waitlist before the NFL draft, you will receive a special promo code with the All-22 subscription. Waitlist users even gain access to premium content like the inaugural draft guide, in-season draft strategies, feature announcements, and all that. Be sure to follow All-22 at All-22_PFF on Twitter. It's such a cool concept. It's such a cool game. I can't wait for you guys to play it. Less fantasy, more actual football. So yeah, Connor, we'll run through. We'll do the same thing. We'll run through 11 through 20, and then you can ask a couple of questions about that. 11. For the Washington Commanders, I had them taking Drake London, the wide receiver from USC. Minnesota Vikings, I had them taking David Ojabo. Cleveland Browns, Garrett Wilson. Baltimore Ravens, Devontae Wyatt. Philadelphia Eagles, this starts a run on like my favorite Eagles haul I've ever had. Eagles, Derek Stingley at 15. Treylon Burks at 16. Then the Chargers took Jordan Davis. New Orleans Saints take Jameson Williams. And then the Eagles again got George Karlaftis at 19. So Eagles fans, Derek Stingley, Treylon Burks, George Karlaftis, hello. And then at number 20 to round it out, I got Malik Willis going as the first quarterback off the board to the Pittsburgh Steelers. What are we talking about, Connor?
Man, 11 through 20, when I was going through this mock draft, when you sent me to start the weekend, I was like, this is going to be a little tough to like kind of poke and prod at a little bit. A lot of this just makes so much sense, and I think so much of it can really happen on draft night. Obviously, the Commanders with Carson Wentz, I think, are looking at wide receiver right now because you obviously have Terry there, but you get somebody across from him. You're going to try to make that situation as best as possible for Carson Wentz, and at 11, you have a good chance of having your entire pick like the Jets did at 10, where it's like, okay, whatever guy we want, we're in the sweet spot to get him. So we'll move to 12 with the Vikings, David Ojabo.
Okay.
This, to me, is one of those chain link effects. Kind of makes you wonder, is Danielle Hunter going to get traded, right? And I think we're going to learn a lot about the Vikings in the next month or two because they are a team that I truly can't figure out. And it's not pressing because they're a new regime. They're going to have time. Trevor, I can't figure out if they are trying to rebuild or trying to run it back what the previous regime did, or because you have to choose eventually, right? And I like that they're holding their cards close. You don't need to tell anyone what you're doing right now. But with Danielle Hunter, he's going to turn 28 this season. He makes a lot of money. He's only played, I think, 7 games in the last 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But he's such a good player at a premium spot that he's worth a lot right now still, or worth enough that it matters. If you are trying to actually rebuild, like Kirk's not going to be back after next year because the contract's going to expire and you want a more quarterback-friendly contract on your roster, by the time you're good again and Aaron Rodgers is back, which probably helps this decision, Danielle Hunter's probably going to be going on the trend downward, not upward anymore. So I look at this and go, you did it at 12 with David Ojabo. You're in position to get your edge of the next 8 to 10 years, right? And you're also in position where you can actually get something for Danielle Hunter right now. I know a lot of Vikings fans probably won't love this, but you have to choose a side. And if that side actually is rebuilding for the next 2 years, Danielle Hunter should be moved now.
I don't disagree with you. Certainly, if you are turning the page, basically do what the Chicago Bears are doing, right? I mean, like, move on from Hicks, move on from Goldman, move on from Khalil Mack, like, get something for them, like, let the cap free up and really hit your next winning window hard with draft picks, with salary cap capital, everything, because they've got Justin Fields in his rookie contract. And so that's kind of what you do there. Minnesota isn't exactly in that situation because they have Kirk Cousins for another year, taking up a huge chunk of their cap. But you're right. They might be doing similar things over the course of the next year. And so I made this pick with David Ojabo, not thinking that Danielle Hunter was going to be gone, because I'd be so hesitant to give up on Danielle Hunter, man. Unless you really know, like, the medicals are going to stick with this guy and he's not going to be in the NFL long and he's not going to be able to be dependable for you. Obviously, maybe you move on at that point. But if there's really anywhere near a decent chance that Danielle Hunter is going to continue to be fully healthy, like you mentioned, he's 27, man. I mean, like, this is a free pass rusher. And so you got to have those guys on your team if you want to have success. I think Ojabo is going to be on their radar. And this was kind of my reasoning for the pick. When I look at Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, their new general manager, he is a data-driven guy. Now, when I say that, you mentioned this and you put it beautifully when we talked about the GM additions. That doesn't mean he's not a football guy. So I don't want people to sit here and say, oh, he's all into data, he doesn't know the real football side of things. No. He even said himself he had experience, when he was with the Browns, doing more football stuff than analytics stuff, and that really helped round out his perspective. So even with that being the case, I still think he's going to make data-driven decisions. And with that in mind, I have a hard time believing that his first premium draft pick that he is going to spend is going to be on a player with limitations one way or the other. Because I think when you look at the needs of the Vikings, I think a lot of people would tell you cornerback is probably the bigger need, if you will. But with Sauce Gardner off the board, who are the other corners that you might look at 12? I think it probably comes down to two guys, either Derek Stingley or Trent McDuffie, okay?
Too much risk both ways.
Trent McDuffie, as much as I truly love the dude as a prospect, and I think he's going to be a really damn good pro, he came in a little bit, he's a little bit smaller of a corner. He wasn't as fast as a lot of people thought. He's got the short arms. Can you play him on the outside full time? Even he has those question marks to him. And then with Derek Stingley, you and I have talked about it plenty now. He's got the Liz Frank injury. It derailed his last year when he was at LSU. He tried to get over it. Then he had to have surgery. Liz Frank injuries can really linger with you. Is he going to spend his first premium pick on a player who might not be available for him? I don't think so. I think it's more plausible that he'd take the chance on a guy like David Ojabo, who has a very high pass rush potential, who is still rounding out his game as a run defender and needs to be a little bit more disciplined in that regard. I think that's the player I would see this Vikings front office target more than the other corners that would be available. So that is my thought process, even beyond Danielle Hunter, for why I had the Vikings taking David Ojabo.
Yeah, and I'll clarify, too, for Vikings fans, I think I'm insane. Like, I would not trade Danielle Hunter in, like, the Amari Cooper fashion. I want a future first-round pick back for him and really commit to the rebuild. If that offer is not there because he hasn't played a lot in the last 2 years, then you run it back with him. You have him under contract. If he has a monster year that Danielle Hunter we all know and love, then maybe you do get that first-rounder, or you keep him and pair him with somebody like a Ojabo. So it's just a different scenario when looking at this draft pick. All right, moving to 13, the very next pick, we will stop right there. Garrett Wilson, I just wanted to give a take here. Even with the Amari Cooper trade, this pick makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It makes sense in you got to know what you have in Baker. And you could play, I'm very, Baker neutral. I think there's this majority that is Baker sucks. And then there's a very small group of people that's no, Baker's still really good. I'm right in the middle where I'm Baker was hurt last year and played through it, and that brought out a bad version of him. Baker has not shown that he is your pay him top 10 money franchise quarterback of the future. I'm right in the middle. We got to see it this year. Mm-hmm. If you got to see it, we know the offensive line's really good. We know they can run the football. We know that they have a tight end. You got to give them wide receivers. You started that with Amari Cooper. It's not going to be enough. You can't just have Amari Cooper out there. And even if you kept Jarvis Landry, that's not enough either. So Garrett Wilson, who I think is the biggest high floor wide receiver, and they know they're a team that'll look to draft athletes, and he tested really well. This one really adds up and gives you the true identity, of finding out if Baker is the dude or if you got to move on at the quarterback position.
I agree completely, and that was my logic with this pick here with Garrett Wilson at 13 to the Cleveland Browns. No player is a sure thing, but I think that Garrett Wilson has a pretty high floor and a high percentage for him to be able to step into the league and contribute in his first season. And when you put him on the field with Donovan Peoples-Jones, now Amari Cooper, and all the tight ends that they have, the running back room, the offensive line in front of Baker, I mean, you can't sit here and tell me that that's not enough. right? Because the whole idea was that you didn't want a scenario to come up where Baker's rookie contract was done and you had an excuse, or he had an excuse to say, I did not have enough. Even if you look at this situation with the Browns and you would say, okay, Amari's maybe not as good as he was before. I mean, he's not terrible, but maybe he's not the Amari that a lot of people still think that he is. He's good, maybe not great. And even if you go, okay, Garrett Wilson's a rookie, that's enough. That has to be enough. You are going to have years in the NFL. If you are a quarterback that has the talent to have a long career in the NFL, you're going to have years exactly like this, if not worse, that you are going to be expected, especially if you're a franchise quarterback, to overcome, to elevate. So if the Browns were to do this and draft Garrett Wilson at 13, yes, that's enough. Could more be done? Of course it could. You would always want to continue your investments to get the offense better and better. But that alleviates you, I think, from, at least in theory, health goes into it and all that things. But in theory, this alleviates you from going to the negotiation table a year from now and saying, we really didn't do right by Baker. Like what the Giants are doing now with Daniel Jones, where they're hey, we haven't really done right by Daniel Jones. If you draft Garrett Wilson, you traded for Amari Cooper, and whether or not Jarvis Landry's on the team, you have done enough, in my opinion, to see whether or not he could be an actual franchise quarterback for you, especially if we're getting a healthy Baker Mayfield next year. So that was my take on that.
Yeah, I'm with you all the way. I think the only debate at this spot is who, right? You got Amari Cooper, a technician, a true separator. That's what Garrett Wilson is as well. Do you think there could be any intrigue from the Browns to look at Jameson Williams and really get that vertical threat, keep the defense back a little bit because of how run-heavy they are? That's what's going to be fascinating to me is, are they like, we don't care about the ACL, which we don't think teams really will. We want the true vertical threat. I don't really think there's a receiver that would be the wrong pick in this spot out of those top four I said.
Yeah, no, obviously, I love Drake London. He's my wide receiver one, but
he's gone.
For Cleveland, I probably would rather have a little bit more of a yards after the catch type of receiver. So a Burks, Williams, a Garrett Wilson, or something like that to go along with the group that they have now. But obviously, if they were to pick Drake London, it's not a bad pick in any way, shape, or form. He could be a third down monster that Baker could just chuck it up to and make things happen.
All right, 14, you had Devontae Wyatt to the Ravens. 15, we talked about the Eagles, Stingley and Burks. And I think Burks is the kind of wide receiver they need, honestly. I think if they had the first pick of the wide receivers, I still think Burks or London are the kind of wide receivers they need to pair with Devontae Smith and help out Jalen Hurts, above the rim kind of targets. 17, the Chargers, Jordan Davis. We've talked about that fit a lot. 18, the Saints, Jameson Williams. 19, the Eagles come back with Karlaftis. I want to stop at this point of the draft because I find this part so interesting. This is the point of the draft when I was making a big board where I was like, man, you start to get a little bit of a talent drop-off. Besides the fact that McDuffie and Linderbaum, and even, for me, Devin Lloyd and Lewis Cine, at this point in the draft, you get a little bit of a cliff. So if you're one of those fan bases that every time you're like, trade out, be careful what you wish for. I'll leave you with that.
It could be the wild, wild west from 20 on, I would say. From pick 20 on.
Completely.
Like any name could come out of Roger Goodell's mouth, and I'd be like, yep, all right.
Not surprised.
Yeah, right.
All right, so before we move on to the final third of the mock draft, I do want to stop at pick 20 with the Steelers, Malik Willis. And I know you agree with me on this take, but this is just the way the board fell. They're going to have to move to get him in this spot, I think. I would be very surprised if Malik Willis was sitting there at 20. Good for Pittsburgh if that's the case. We know how much they're interested in him. I'm fascinated in what the sweet spot is really going to be. I don't know if Seattle's going to look to restart with a rookie quarterback with Pete's age. Maybe they will. I think the Jets are going to be open to moving at 10. Maybe Washington's open to moving at 11.
Right.
But who are you jumping there is the question, right? So I just wonder, if the Panthers get Watson, maybe Malik Willis does fall a little bit. I'm just trying to find a home for him here. The Saints at 18, that's not far. So while I think the Steelers got to move up, maybe we've drastically overrated how far that actually is.
The most difficult part about mock drafts is not predicting good picks for teams. It's predicting the inevitable bad picks, or picks that, I won't even say bad picks, just the picks
Surprises?
that shock us the most.
Mm-hmm.
That is the most difficult part, because I can, when I write a mock draft, I write it logically. Like of course, I'm trying to put myself in the seat of the general managers and listen to the hints and look at the roster and things like that, and truly come down to, okay, who do I think they would pick? And for example, like the Travon Walker selection, like the Trevor Penning selection, those may be a little bit rich from my blood, but I still see them happening. I don't know how Malik Willis is going. I mean, we talked about him going number 2 overall, right? Now I have him going 20. This is where the first quarterback goes off the board is the most difficult part of a 2022 mock draft, 100%. Because I totally agree with you. If the Steelers want him, they're probably going to have to trade up. I didn't want to do trades in this mock draft because I was going to be changing it a lot because it's a live mock draft that we're doing free agency. So
Trevor,
what?
Tom Brady just came back.
What?
Tom Brady just came back.
Oh my God. I told you he wasn't done. I told you he wasn't done, baby.
That's how we started the show. I had to read this 45 times while you were ranting to make sure it wasn't like fake Tom Brady, that I'm reading this right.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh. You knew he wasn't done. You knew he wasn't.
He told Ronaldo he wasn't, and they posted it to his account.
Have asked him. So many people have asked him, "Are you done? Are you done? Are you done?"
The man's had enough.
Never said no, and he's never said no. He's never said no. Oh my!
Did he just need to be home, like with the wife and kids, for a month to reach this conclusion? Like, did he reach the point where it was a pot of coffee every morning and he's just staring at the ceiling?
He lasted a month and a half.
Yo.
He lasted a month.
He's like, nah, I gotta get to OTAs.
Oh,
I've had
let's
enough
go,
of this.
baby. I'm buying a Cristiano Ronaldo jersey.
I have not celebrated a lot of Tom Brady things in my life, growing up in New York, but as a Tom Brady Dynasty League owner, this just saved me a ton of trouble. And honestly, a ton of trouble. But this is right as free agency starts. Like, if you're the Bucs right now, you're like, how do we make the money work for Ryan Jensen? How do we make the money work for...
Oh my gosh, Tom Brady's gonna play for free, dude. He's gonna play for free. You know, Tom Brady's on the phone with Ali Marpet right now. He's on the phone with Ali Marpet this second. Get your ass out of retirement. We got one more run, baby.
So he's got a $20 million cap hit this year. All right. I mean, people listening to this are probably just like, because obviously Trevor and I record Sunday evenings. Now you know the exact time if you read the tweet. I'm scrambled eggs right now. I don't even know how to function.
Oh my God.
Well, speaking of Tom Brady, the Patriots are up at 21.
Yeah, basically. Oh my God.
You want to read the picks?
Sure. Yeah, I will. I will read the picks here. Okay,
Yeah.
21 through 32. Let's finish this bad boy up. New England Patriots, Chris Olave. Las Vegas Raiders, Kenyon Green. Arizona Cardinals, Zion Johnson. Dallas Cowboys, Bernard Raymond. Buffalo Bills, Trent McDuffie. Tennessee Titans, Tyler Smith, the offensive tackle from Tulsa, for those of you who don't know. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tyler Linderbaum, now snapping for the GOAT himself. Tom Brady, confirmed. Green Bay Packers, go with Devin Lloyd. Miami Dolphins, Breece Hall. Kansas City Chiefs, Lewis Seen. Cincinnati Bengals, Kyer Elam, and then Detroit Lions at number 32. They go with Nakobe Dean to round out this first round mock. Where we start? Tom Brady, great. Yeah, I think the Bucs are immediate favorite. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. What spot do you want to start with here?
All right, now that I've come back to reality, 21, the Patriots. Let's start right there. Chris Olave is such a Patriots player. I've just thought about this pick for months at this point, where he's played special teams, the mentality. He fits what they need at wide receiver. He can win deep. He knows how to get open. He's great at tracking everything. He's a really smart guy. I know the Patriots obviously are a team that this is a skill set they need, but just everything about his identity fits this mold. And at 21, this is probably going to be their best option. Guys fall all the time, but at 21, I don't think Jameson Williams is going to be there. I don't think Garrett Wilson's going to be there. From everything I'm starting here, I don't think Drake London's going to be there. Treylon Burks, I know the combine was disappointing. He shouldn't be. So maybe Treylon, maybe. But this is probably the guy that's going to be the best available and fits exactly what they love in players. So when you had this one, I'm like, yep. I'm almost at the point where, like, we'll keep the whiteout on the desk, but write that one in ink.
So, I mean, yeah. I think that this has to be the pick for them there. And you know, Chris Olave with the Patriots, I mean, we've heard rumblings of, you know, like N'Keal Harry kind of wants out. They don't really have an option there. I mean, Mac Jones needs somebody that's a little bit more reliable. Even for Mac Jones standards, he needs to stretch the field. They need to keep defenses honest. Like, all of this stuff needs to happen. And so, like, Olave going at this point, man, I thought Olave was a first-round potential wide receiver last year. And so I think the same thing this year. I really do. I know people, I know Ohio State fans in particular, really got on me when I had Olave as 6 in my rankings. You had him 5B, by the way. Yeah, I just got to point that out. I got to point that out. So
was it 5A or B? Which one?
So, look, I think you're mad when it's like, how is he not in your top 5? Well, I think more than 5 receivers should go in the first round. Do you want me to call him a first-round wide receiver? I got no problem with that. I think that pick definitely made sense there with
I'll teach you the tricks of how to not get roasted in the comments, my friend.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Always find a way. Okay, so Kenyon Green to the Raiders, Zion Johnson to the Cardinals. 24 the Cowboys. You have Bernard Raymond. And we know Dallas is probably going to be looking offensive line, especially early with this pick. While we were recording this, Michael Gallup got a pretty juicy extension, 5 years, $62.5 million.
Ooh,
and
nice.
They obviously traded Amari Cooper, more of a salary dump. I have a question that is so broad. What is Dallas doing right now? And I don't mean that as like a dunk on Dallas. I don't mean that on it just feels like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I think it all comes back to the Zeke contract hamstringing them in certain areas a little bit. I know they didn't want to lose Dalton Schultz, so they went the franchise tag route. I know that they probably internally felt like Amari was overpaid and that money was easy to move, obviously. They obviously like Michael Gallup. I think my problem with Dallas is you're picking in the spot where the talent in this draft starts to fall off. You've run into a salary crunch at multiple areas. And while you probably are still the most talented team in the division, what are you going to do to be better than the Rams? What are you going to do to be better than the Packers? What are you going to do to be better than the 49ers? And I'm usually the guy that hates asking those questions without having the answers. That's usually that kind of a thing that I find particularly annoying. But right now I look at Dallas and go, they're in a brutal spot right now. And this pick kind of set off that green light of how much better does Bernard Raymond make them, especially if you move on from Lyle Collins. It just feels like, yes, they are still top dog in the division, but they cannot get over this hump to be the kings of the NFC.
You know, when I look at the Cowboys situation, unfortunately, I think the contracts that they have signed over the last, 4 or 5-ish years have kind of like come back to haunt them in certain ways. I don't think they've been the best at extensions, Ezekiel Elliott. And so that's why you're seeing some of these guys kind of have a little bit of exodus from Dallas. But I mean, to answer your question, and with Bernard Raymond, what you are hoping is that you're just hoping that you're status quo. Now, it's not that you hope that you're status quo not getting to the Super Bowl. That's not what I mean.
Sure.
When you have the caliber of team that Dallas even does, you give yourself a chance, right? When you have Dak, when you have that offensive line healthy and playing well, when you have even receivers that without Amari Cooper, like CeeDee Lamb, like Michael Gallup, right? And when you have guys in the backfield like Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard who can get it done, we have a defense that plays really well up front and a secondary that's getting better, and Micah Parsons being an absolute animal,
maybe
right?
The best defensive player on the planet in the next 5 years. Yeah, that's fair.
You give yourself the opportunity to, any given Sunday, if you will, compete and
that's
potentially win every game. So I think that this pick here for Dallas, them picking another offensive lineman, it is their best attempt at staying with the status quo. We often look at, okay, it's got to be an upgrade here. Okay, why are you getting rid of Lyle Collins just to bring in Bernard Raymond? Well, unfortunately, probably some of their old cap moves probably has forced their hand a little bit here and there, and they're hoping that Raymond can allow them to contain the status quo, which is be a contender. be favorites in the NFC East. And I think that that's kind of where we are with Dallas at this point.
I think my frustration with potentially moving on from Collins is that if you keep him, you could take Tyler Linderbaum with this pick, which I think would be a significantly better pick. You're talking about, at least in the eyes of this draft analyst here, I have Linderbaum as the 5th best player in this class, and I have Bernard Raymond. It's not good when you can't find the guy for a long time, but outside the top 30. So I think when you look at it like that, it's just a scenario. I have him 45th. Whoa. We'll talk about that another day for the offensive line show. But yeah, Dallas is just in an interesting cap crunch, and I think when you have a franchise quarterback like Dak, your point resonates that you're just trying to live another day, compete, and give yourself a chance to play in one of the big games. All right, so 25, the Bills, Trent McDuffie. That is a scheme fit like a tight glove. That is perfect there. I know the Bills will be, we've talked about this with them. They could be looking at wide receiver. They could be looking at pass rusher. I wouldn't be surprised to see them make some kind of big move at pass rusher in free agency or on the trade market, and then McDuffie would fall into place. 26, the Titans, offensive line help. Tyler Smith is their kind of guy. That is a scheme fit. That is an attitude, mentality fit. Let's stop right at the freaking Buccaneers, man. 27, Tyler Linderbaum. Before Tom Brady blew up our quiet Sunday evening, I wrote in the doc, people will think this is nuts, but it's not. And that's because you obviously have a great player in Ryan Jensen, whose free agency is very TBD right now. When you could just slot in a top 5 center for the next 10 years, which I think Tyler Linderbaum will be, that puts the Bucs in such a great reload position. And now that Brady is back, this might make even more sense, to be honest with you.
Dude,
does Brady being back change this? Let me ask you that.
No, I mean, it doesn't, because I think they're still going to lose Ryan Jensen unless Ryan Jensen takes like the biggest pay cut ever, which I don't think was going to be the case even before Brady retired. This pick doesn't change at all with Brady. I mean, especially with Marpet also being retired, like for now. With Brady, I like all things are possible. So I don't think the pick changes, but I do want to talk about Tyler Linderbaum a little bit. I don't get it, man.
I don't either.
I don't get it. I'd be picking Tyler Linderbaum way sooner than this. There are going to be so many really smart draft analysts who have Tyler Linderbaum as a top 15, top 10, maybe even player in this class, and yet all of them are going to mock him somewhere at the back end of the first round, maybe even in the late 20s like we have here. And that's because the NFL, there's just not a lot of buzz on this guy. And I think a lot of NFL teams don't like the fact that his measurables were really short. His height, his weight, his arm length, all below the 10th percentile for interior offensive linemen in the NFL, which isn't great, but turn on the freaking tape, man. Go turn on the freaking tape.
Yep, it's all there.
You cannot find anyone who has a bad thing to say about Tyler Linderbaum outside of his measurables, which he clearly makes up for. Clearly, he's put out that tape consistently now. So I think the fact of the matter is he's just going to go later than a lot of people think, which kind of blows my mind, especially in this class when there aren't a lot of sure things, when it's not the most loaded class at the top. How is Tyler Linderbaum going this late? So look, man, I have no idea if he goes this late, but I know I'm letting you know now that if he's on the board at 27, Tampa's probably sprinting to the table, or at least they should.
I've never watched such a dominant prospect or been so excited about a dominant prospect. And literally, people I talk to working in the NFL are like a total wet carrot about this guy. And it's not like they don't like Tyler Linderbaum. It's just there's nothing there that they're like, this is a rare center or this is a guy that has to go in the top 10. It's wild to me. I feel like this is going to be almost even a boosted Creed Humphrey situation where it's like, this guy's really good. Everybody was like, Creed Humphrey, top 30 player. Then he goes as late as he did, and he was great all year. Tyler Linderbaum, top 10, 15 player, going to go at the end of round 1. Everyone's like, wow, he was awesome. He was one of the best interior offensive linemen in football, and he's going to be that for a long time. Why did we let this happen? All right, 28, the Green Bay Packers. You had them taking Devin Lloyd. 29, the Miami Dolphins. Breece Hall. My take here is that I think they'll reach on the best offensive lineman available in this spot, knowing Mike McDaniels need to revamp that group and to get whoever is getting the handoffs a little bit of running room. Maybe they can find Kenneth Walker on day 2. There's a lot of different backs that actually would fit what they want to do. Even Pierre Strong. I think Miami is that slot at 29 where And in this scenario, it's not good, Trevor, to be honest with you. Linderbaum's gone. Tyler Smith is gone. Those are 2 names that I would connect to them. I don't know if Kennard is the level of athlete they would want in this spot. Penning and Raymond are gone.
Right.
This is not the situation you want to be staring down if you're the Dolphins.
Right. And that's kind of where I came out with the mock and the selection with the Dolphins is Dolphins fans are going to be mad at me for not having an offensive lineman go to them at 29. But good offensive linemen don't really make it to 29. Like, they just don't.
You can't invent one.
I know that you're going to come back and argue with me and name names of guys who went in the second, third, fourth, whatever round and played well in the NFL. Okay, well, what's the percentage there? What other offensive linemen are picked around that range that did not work out? It's just offensive line is a premium position. Tackles are the most premium, and you want to have good guys up front as well on the interior too. The good ones go early, especially before number 29. And I think the Dolphins are in trouble if they're not going to trade up, because I don't think they're going to be super happy with any of the guys that are left. Now, I like Darian Kinnard. I really do. So, like, if they took Darian Kinnard at 29, I'd be great with it. I really would. I think that would be a good pick. It doesn't seem like the NFL is as in on Darian Kinnard as I am, which I think that's always been the case. I've always been a little bit higher on Kinnard. So if they pick Kinnard, I think it's a great pick for them. I really do. But it just doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. And look, I think Breece Hall is going to be a damn good running back. I really do. The only concern I had with him was the long speed, and he really put on a show in Indianapolis with the combine and being able to run as fast as he did. So yes, you have to have a good offensive line for the running back behind them to actually maximize their talents. I'm not denying that. But you can still pick the running back and then add the offensive line a little bit later. And hopefully in 2 years, whatever it is, it all comes together and it works out for you. You know, it might not be as pretty as you want it to be in year one, but that's not to say you can't pick Breece Hall and him be really good for you year 2, year 3, year 4 of his contract. So that's where I was along that thinking. I'd love for them to pick an offensive lineman just like everybody else would, but not a lot of great options at number 20 or 20.
Can't invent a pick. And I do like Breece Hall. He's a top 30 player for me. So the value is on the money there. All right, 30, the Chiefs, Lewis Cine. All I wanted to say about this was Lewis Cine deserves to go round 1. He is an incredible athlete. He comes down with tenacity coming downhill, running the alley. He is completely adequate enough as a cover safety where he can really do a lot of different things for you and play at an impressive speed, bring some leadership to your secondary. That for the Chiefs at 30, it's honestly one of the best picks of this entire first round. 31, the Bengals, Kaiir Elam. Goes back to the Miami argument. You cannot invent an offensive lineman. I hope the Bengals are very active in free agency and the trade market to not go into their draft with their backs against the wall at 31 where or they have to move up or anything like that. 32, the Lions, Nakobe Dean. That has been a favorite of ours for a long time. And that being said, that was the mock draft, dude. A lot. I'm glad this was a scenarios mock draft, right? For us, it's like, what if this happens? What if this happens? And I think we're at the time of year where the reality is a lot of the listeners of the show are either diehards or are now completely caught up on the draft where they know all these players. Now we're talking about the teams, the thought process, the landing spots, and if you get punched in the mouth, right, your plan A doesn't work, what's the B, C, and D?
Yeah, and this is it really is the fun part of mock drafts now, because we have, I guess at least I have, I don't want to speak for you, I've had my fill of doing mocks where I would tell you what I would do. We're at the point where we've even been doing this podcast for about a month and a half, almost 2 months now, where we've been telling people what we think of prospects. Now it's time to get into the let's kind of flex our knowledge a little bit and really predict where these guys might go. And so there's seasons within draft season, right? And I think that we are now in the season of predictive mocks, and it's fun, man. I think this is going to be the first of many. I'm excited to get to the end of April. I can't remember. Have you done the Huddle Report mock draft before? I think we've had this conversation. Have you ever done one of those?
The Huddle Report mock draft.
Yes. So it's a mock draft competition. Have you seen this? You haven't seen this?
Yes. Didn't Josh Norris crush last year? If I remember this correctly?
Josh Norris won last year, but
yes.
So many big wigs around the industry put their final predictive mock.
Oh, I'm in
test.
This year, baby. Let's go.
I need you to be in, man.
Let's
I need you to be in because I'm excited for it, man. It's something that I've done for each of the last. Have I done it for 4 years?
Oh, what the hell? Where the hell have I been?
Dude, I don't know, man. I don't know.
God.
Look, I'm just,
I'm in. Let's do it.
Look, I'm not going to brag a little bit, but I am going to brag a little bit. 2 out of the last 3 years, I've been top 10 in the world.
Top 10 in the
accurate
world?
mock drafts. Yeah, what's up? What's up?
Dude, how did I land you as a co-host?
Holler at your boy.
Is that the top thing on your resume? Or the first thing in your reel? It's just like you holding up your graded mock draft. Oh my God. I still can't get out of my head that Tom Brady's back. I'm just like completely. I'm not shocked. I've been waiting for this. I literally made a joke at the beginning of the show that Tom Brady's coming back, but it's really threw a wild wrinkle into our Monday stock exchange. And tomorrow's is going to be our free agency special.
Yep.
So this is pure mayhem. This is as close as mayhem as you get for a draft pod besides the actual week of the draft.
This week is going to be amazing. Like Connor mentioned, tomorrow's episode, we're going through all of the tampering period news that we heard where teams can finally talk to free agents. So there's going to be a lot of needs for teams changing. So much is going to shoot. Tom Brady came back, man. Who else knows what's going to happen in the next 24 hours? I'm very excited about it. You guys should be too. Me and Connor will be back with you tomorrow to recap all of the changes that we are going to hear and see in the NFL. We'll see you guys then.